Hi, this costume for the Carmel Doll Shop's FG Angelique is really special. It's called Madame Polichinelle, and it's inspired by classic Polichinelle costumes of the 19th century. Both dolls and children would sometimes be dressed as Polichinelle, who's a commedia dell'arte character, sort of like a clown, sort of a prankster. And this costume is just wonderful. It's made of two different colors of this gorgeous silk satin, a pistachio green and pink. As you can see, the skirt is pieced together, so it has sort of like almost like it's not harlequin in the sense of being like a triangle or a diamond shape, but it basically has that sort of like color pattern of contrasting colors. It makes it very festive. And the same thing is repeated in her bodice. And as you can see, the sleeves are trimmed with different colors. They're different colors, but they're also trimmed with this beautiful ruching that you're going to be creating. And then there's her incredible hat, which is really a classic Polichinelle style, also in contrasting fabric, but it's been trimmed with these beautiful gathered silk satin, pink silk satin and cream ribbons. So I think this one is a lot of fun to make. Angelique is really a joy to sew for. She's very, very cute. Her body is just like a very sort of compact little body. And I think, again, the reproduction by Karen Clohessy for the Carmel Doll Shop is just so, so beautiful. The face is just gorgeous. One of the best things about this costume is, and all of the kits from the Carmel Doll Shop, as you know, are really special. You'll be getting a pair of these beautiful coral colored stockings, as well as these shoes that are decorated, and they basically will lace around the ankle with the silk ribbons. So this is sort of a classic 1880s costume, maybe 1880s or towards the mid to the late 1880s, but you're gonna have a lot of fun with this. It's a great, great project, and I hope you enjoy the video. Thank you. So we're starting with the skirt, and the skirt is really fun. It's this, I guess you wouldn't really call this checkerboard, but contrasting skirt. It's basically, if you imagine this divided directly down the center, you're going to have a pink panel, the pistachio green panel, then a contrasting green panel, then a contrasting pink panel, pink, and then green. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pinning these together, and I'm going to be using a 3/16 inch seam allowance for the skirt. And the most important thing that we want to do is just imagine you're making a quilt. You really want to make sure that your seam allowances are all identical. So when you piece these together, they're going to meet exactly in the center, as you can see this does. So again, approximately 3/16 inch seam allowance. Let me just double check that. Yeah, that's not quite a quarter. It's like a 3/16. Yep, it's 3/16. So I would use 3/16 for that. You're going to sew these together separately. You're going to be doing these strips together. And I'm going to be using the sewing machine for this because, again, in the 1880s, they would have used a combination of the sewing machine and hand stitching for these bébé costumes. I'm not going to show you me stitching these together, but you just want to make sure that you have them in the right layout. Also, with this fabric, there is a right and a wrong side to the satin. The right side of the satin is going to be the side that's a little bit smoother to the touch, and the wrong side is going to be a little bit more matte, and it won't have that sort of smooth satiny feeling to it. So we're going to take these away. And then after we've done that, and this is gonna, you're gonna see this is gonna fray a lot, but don't worry about it. This whole thing is going to be lined with one piece of the lining. And then we're going to treat it as really one piece once it's assembled. So I'm going to show you how this this comes together. I'm going to do these center seams first, and maybe I'll do one of the long seams just to show you how that comes together. And then we're going to line it, and then we're going to pleat it. And our last step will be the waistband and the closure. So it's just this beautiful, full, very, very sort of festive skirt, and really quite easy to pleat. You'll see when we get to that. You're going to have a pleating diagram in your pattern, and I suggest that you practice, cut it out and practice the folds before you actually do this, because this is probably the third time I'm doing it, just to try to figure out how to match the exact, well, the approximate pleating of the sample dress. So what we basically have is something that's going to be symmetrical. This is our, where is it? This is our center seam, rather where the color changes. And what we're doing is we're making an inverted box pleat. And again, this is going to be in your directions, but it's going to be a 1-inch inverted box pleat. So when you're doing that, you measure 2 inches, it folds on the 1 inch, and then you've got 1 inch here. So after that, this is where it gets to be maybe a little bit, I don't think it's confusing, but it just takes a little bit of getting used to. You're going to have a second pleat, and what I like to do, because I think it really just, it works for me, you might have your own way of doing it, because this is sort of like more of a complicated pattern in terms of the folds. What I like to do is I like to just mark it out. So in this case, I'm marking 3/8 away from our fold. Then I'm going to mark another 1.5 inches from that mark. So in total, it's not really, is it 2 inches? It's a little bit under 2 inches. What I do is I think it actually really makes it easy, or easier, for at least for me, is I will fold, making sure that your bottom is aligned and everything's on the straight. I will make a fold and press that down. So basically what I'm doing is I'm creating this, like that first fold. Here, let me just pin this down because it'll be much easier to see. I'm creating that first fold. So basically I'm bringing this fold over and I'm meeting the 3/8 inch mark. And in this way, you're taking up, this is quite a wide amount of fabric. You're taking up the appropriate amount of fabric that we need to do to pull this into I think it's like a 9.5 or 10 inch waistband. So I'm going to do this symmetrically. You're going to see that we've got our inverted pleat. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 of these pleats. So I'll have to make 4 more. Again, at the same sort of way that we've been doing it. And, you know, these pleats don't necessarily, you know how some pleats just meet, they don't overlap. These pleats actually overlap quite a bit in the back. So it's bringing in all that extra, well, not extra, but that width and making it more controllable. So if you could sort of see this and bring this in to that 3/8 mark. So there's a little bit of an overlap here in the back. Those folds are not necessarily meeting, they're overlapping. Because again, we've got a lot of fullness that we have to pull in. So I'm going to try to do this. Let's see, how can I do this and show it to you? Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 1, 2, and I have 2 more. I don't want you to have to sit through all of this, but once you get to your 4th pleat, this 1, 2, 3, 4, yep, you're going to make a 1.25 inch box pleat. So, you know, again, you measure it out when you get there. You measure out your 1.25, and then you're going to bring in that 1.25 so your pleats meet exactly in the center. Now at that point, once you've reached the box pleat, you're going to start going in the other direction. So basically the skirt, the way that Michael designed this is just so charming. You've got your inverted pleat, then you have pleats that are going towards the center, then you have your box pleat, and you have pleats that are going away towards the back. You're going to do the same exact thing here. So I'm going to continue doing that. And you see you've got a lot of fabric that you pull in doing this method. I'm going to continue doing this, and I'm going to come back after I've pinned these and I'm satisfied with them, and I'm just checking the waist measurement, which, as I said, is about 9.5, 10 inches. There's a little bit of overlap in the back. I'm just going to keep checking that and making sure that that seems right. I've checked it against the sample, and it seems right. So I'm going to continue making these pleats. I will baste them down across the top. I'll machine baste them across the top, and I will hand baste them across the bottom, just so they keep their shape while we're working with this. We just don't want it to sort of flare out or we lose our creases, because you're going to want to do a nice press on this after you've done all of your pleats. So again, pressing, folding, so I'm meeting that mark. So you've got a really kind of a deep pleat on the back, or basically when this flares open, it's going to have a lot of flare around the skirt. So I'm going to continue doing this. I will be back and you'll see it basted together, and we'll talk about how we close the back. So the skirt has been closed up the back, and I based this on the sample size in terms of the waist, but I think you probably want to do yourself a favor and just measure your doll's waist and add approximately 1 inch. So you'll have about 1/2 inch overlap in the back. This is 9 right now. Got to get rid of some of these fluffy things because they're going to drive me crazy. So basically what we did was we stitched it up. We made it, we measured off 9 inches. We added about, I don't know, 1/2 inch on either side. So that would make it about 10 inches. And we sewed it together, and we sewed it about 2 inches up, and then we stopped. And then we turned in and slip stitch down our seam allowance on both sides. So I'm going to turn it inside out, and now we're going to do the waistband. I think this is just such a pretty skirt, so full, very pretty. Now I was saying this is a 9-inch waist, so what I've done is I've cut a 10-inch waistband, 10 by 2. And you're going to notice that this is pieced together, and it is the pistachio color. That's not what you're going to be using. You're going to be using a pink satin, but I didn't have any pink satin at this moment, so we are using the pistachio. And what we're going to do is we are going to apply the waistband, aligning. Oh, we're gonna press in or fold in and press seam allowance on one side, one long side of this waistband. And now what we're doing is we are aligning our top raw edges together. Just want to make sure that when you're putting this on that you've got that extra bit, you know, an extra 1/4 inch approximately hanging past each of the back openings, because you're going to need to turn that in once you've sewn the waistband in place. So we're going to sew this together. I think, I know that we were doing a 3/16 for this part of the skirt and for all the seams in the skirt so far, but I think we'll probably do a 1/4 inch here, because she can probably, you know, it could get a little bit shorter. And then what we're going to be doing, and I'm going to show you on this, is we're going to be turning that under. It's going to be quite bulky because there's so many layers of satin and the lining here, but we are going to be turning that over, tucking in the short ends, and we're going to be slip stitching that all the way around and up the end. So we're 2 tucked ends, and we're going to be slip stitching around the bottom. We are also then going to put it on the doll and see how it fits for this hook and for this thread bar. And then we will move on to the bodice. So now that the skirt is done, we're going to move on to the bodice. The bodice is really beautiful. It's a pink center with 2 pistachio sides, pink center backs with 2 pistachio sides. One sleeve is pink and one sleeve is pistachio. I think just sort of follow, just in terms of the placement, make sure that you're following this diagram and this finished piece and what is actually shown in the instructions. So we're also going to be making this ruche trim, which is really beautiful, and these ribbon rosettes. And as a last step, we're going to be gathering this pink ribbon and applying it to the inside of the neckline. There's also a rosette in the center back. So what we're going to do, now this is sort of your decision, I think, however you feel comfortable. You could, and with the exception of the center, which I'll explain in a second, you could flatline all of these pieces within the seam allowance. You know, I think I like to use flatlining, but since I want to really progress on this, I probably won't baste these all together. I'm just going to pin them and I'm going to sew them together. So basically that's what you're going to need to do. You're going to need to have a piece of the bodice in the fabric as it's indicated on the pattern, and you're going to need a corresponding tarlatan layer. So be careful when you're cutting out the fabric too. I'm not sure if I said this in the skirt video, but there are 2 different sides to this. If you sort of feel the satin and it sort of feels a little bit more textured, not as smooth, that is the wrong side. The satin side should be very, very smooth to the touch. Now, the thing what you're going to do differently, and this is the first thing you're going to do, is you're going to put the center front pieces right side to right side. And with tarlatan, there is no right side, but what we're going to be doing is we're going to be seaming this across. This is all going to be made with a 3/16 inch seam allowance. We're going to seam across the top, and then we're going to flip it over, press it, and then we'll treat it as one piece of fabric. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go away and I'm going to actually probably assemble half of the front, and I will assemble half of the back so you can actually see how that comes together. Now, another thing is, I've had this in some workshops, some confusion about this, but when you're putting the backs together, it's always, you sort of like, this is almost like a puzzle piece. You're matching the curve to the curve. So just make sure that when you're doing this, and this might actually be a good one to machine base together within the 3/16 inch seam allowance, because this tends to shift a little bit. I think I will do that. You're going to basically be aligning this at the bottom, and you're going to be aligning it at the top, and you're going to have to ease it into this curve. Sometimes I find it helpful to take little clips into the curved edge because it really helps it to move a little bit more. The tarlatan is not really stretchy, the satin is. But that's what we're going to do for our next steps. I'll be back and I will show you a finished half of the back and a finished half of the front, and then we will finish those off and we'll tell you about the next steps. So I always do more than I say I'm going to do, and I apologize for that, but I just really want to keep this progressing. So what we had done is we had sewn the 2 front sides to, well, first we had actually seamed the wrong sides of the center together. We turned it inside, turned it right side out, pressed that edge, and then we're going to treat that as one layer of material. We also, I did go and I did baste together the tarlatan and the satin within, you can see a little bit of it here, within the seam allowance, because it just makes it much easier to deal with. And, you could always do that by basting it by hand, but this costume would have been sewn with machine and with hand stitching, so I'm using a combination of both. Then what we've done is once we finished the front, we're going to do the same thing with the back. Remember, we're easing in this piece, and I did that by taking little tiny clips into the pink edge so it would just sort of like bend a little bit. And then once we've done that, we overcast the seam on the back and on the front, and we press those towards the sides. So we press that towards the side, we press this towards this side, this towards this side. So what we then did is I overcast, again within the seam allowance, overcast from the curve over the shoulder, around the armhole, and then on the side for almost all of these pieces. The reason why I'm doing that is that this is all going to be, some of it's going to be turned over, some of it's going to be kept, I would say, raw, but you're going to want to have a nice finish without having all this satin sort of fraying. So our next step will be to, there'll be a cut an inch wide by approximately the height. Well, you can do a little bit more. I did, and you'll trim it off by the height of your back. With right sides together, you're going to seam that strip of satin. You're going to turn over your seam allowance. You're going to bring it to the inside, and I'll just pin this quickly. And you're going to sew it down with a slip stitch. You're going to have to be really careful because there's no embellishment on the back really. So you're going to see the back. Is when you're doing that, just be careful, and I finished one on this side, to not have any of your stitches show up in the back. I mean, I think I see a tiny little bit, maybe down here, but I think that's okay. And once you've done that, you're going to press it again. The next step is going to be, oh, I'm sorry, I think I forgot one step, as I always do. You're going to seam the front and the backs together at the shoulders and at the sides. Because you've already overcast them, you don't have to worry about that. You're going to press those seams open. Then you're going to put the back strip on. After the back strips are on, you're going to turn in the seam allowance on the neckline and match it to the seam allowance, or to the seam that's on the front. So in other words, you're going to have sort of like a clean surface to work with. And once I've done this, I will trim it off at the top. I'll do the same thing on this side. You might want to take a little bit of just a tiny clip or two to make it easier to fold in the green, because there's a slight curve there, but you shouldn't have any problem on the back. You might want to do that on the back too. It's up to you. So I'm going to finish this side. I'm going to turn over the top. I'm going to slip stitch that in place. Again, really being careful not to let the stitches show from the front. And then I'm going to overcast the bottom, and I'll probably just stay stitch it as well within the seam allowance. This is all going to be covered by the ruching, so I wouldn't really worry too much about that. It's going to be covered by at least a good inch, a quarter of an inch, or 3/16 of an inch. So, you just want to make sure it's just neat and it stays together at the bottom. So I will go away and I will do that. And then we will take a look at the sleeve construction, which is very, very simple. And our bodice is almost, with the exception of the decoration, our bodice is almost done. The majority of the sewing on this bodice, I think, is going to be the ruching. So, again, while you're working on this, you can fit it to your doll and see how it's looking on her. But this is probably a good time once these steps are done, just to see how it's fitting and make any adjustments that you have to make. So the neckline has been turned under and slip stitched. Hopefully, I think maybe I see one little stitch that's showing from that side. Done that on both sides. And now what you're going to do is you're going to make your sleeves. The sleeves are really pretty simple. I'll take this apart just to show you. So you're going to want to sew them along the cuff side, right sides together. Actually, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to press this. I did this on the other sleeve and it was much better. So, you know, I like to press the seam allowance towards the fabric side of the sleeve. And then what you're going to do, because you want that to be nice and flat, then what you're going to do is you're going to match your cuffs. Baby's going crazy today for some reason, as always. You're going to match your raw edges, and you're going to match your cuff seam. And then you're going to sew this together in one continuous seam. Now, after I've done that, what I like to do, I don't know if you have one of these little thingamajigs, these little ironing boards. I like to press the seam open so it can lay nice and flat when this is turned inside out. And that's going to be our next step, is to turn it inside out. Once we've turned it inside out, we're going to, within the seam allowance, we're going to sew a running stitch through the fabric and through the lining all the way across the cap of the sleeve. When the sleeve is inserted, you just want to match the center top of the sleeve and the bottom seam of the sleeve, and you're basically doing that. You're matching that inside. You're matching your center top to the shoulder seam. You're matching the side sleeve seam to this seam. So what I did was I sort of gently pulled up the easing as I was doing this, and just because you don't want to see any bumps or anything like that. And when I turned it inside out, it's actually looking like, you know, it's okay. But if you really want to check it, you can always baste it and then put it on your doll and see how it's fitting, because I think that's probably the best test, is to constantly fit to your particular doll. But I'm going to throw caution to the winds, and I'm going to actually sew this in place with the belief that everything will be okay. And I'm sure it will be. So we're going to sew it together. I'm going to sew it together with a tight back stitch all the way across, all the way around. I know that we've already overcast, but I think it probably would be a good idea just to neaten up if you want to cut into it a little bit, you overcast again tightly, and then we're going to repeat that on the other side. Again, follow the instructions. The left sleeve is, well, let's see. If the doll is wearing this, her right sleeve is going to be the pistachio. The left sleeve is going to be the pink. So let's just follow that, and everything will be fine. So I'm going to come back when I have finished this other sleeve, and I still need to overcast the bottom, but we can look at that a little bit later. The next step is going to be to create this ruche trim, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's a beautiful, beautiful technique, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. So I will be back, and we will continue with the bodice. You're going to have a length of green satin cut to size and a length of pink satin cut to size. And what you're going to do, with right sides together, you're going to sew these with a 3/16 seam allowance all the way down, and then you're going to turn them inside out. Now, I think people have a lot of different tools for turning inside out. I really like these. I think I found these on Amazon, but basically you slip them in, you clip, and then you pull the fabric over it. It's a little tricky. It takes some getting used to, but it does certainly work. Now, I've already done the ruching for the bottom of the bodice, and I don't think I have as nice a machine or a very good quality machine as you've probably heard me complain before, but I'm not that crazy about these gathers. I think the ones in the sample garment were really gorgeous and tight, and they look like little pleats. this just was not working for me. So enough of that. We're just going to move on. And what we've done is I think in the instructions or in the photos, it might show the miter first, and then you gather it. I'd like to gather it and then miter it because I think you're going to have a better result at the very center point of the miter. So what we're going to do is we are going to position this so it's exactly in the center. And it's hanging over the edge, probably that lower ruffle. Yeah, the lower ruffle is just hanging over the edge. Or the lower side of the ruffle. I'm just going to continue wrapping that around. And when we come to the end, we are going to wrap it to the other side. Now, on the sample garment, we have this rosette here at the back. So this, the pink seems to be a bit, how would you put it, a bit thicker in terms of the satin than the green. So what I'm going to do is probably not going to wrap the pink around. I'm just going to make sure that I stitch it securely, and then but I will wrap the green around because the green is a little bit thinner and easier to deal with. You see, I think those pleats are much nicer on this side. Not that it really helps, but so what we're going to do is we're going to, using the different colored threads, we are going to, you can't see by what I'm doing here. I'm going to actually tack it down, and I'm going to take tiny little stitches through the center of those gathers. And so just basically sort of, tacking it down, but securely. You want it to be you want it to be held fast. Oh, and here's our sleeve. So I think one of the sleeves, at least, I'm going to do the pink sleeve in a little bit because I really just wanted to move on to this. The day is getting shorter, and I really want to get the video in good shape by the end of the day. So, I'm actually going to do this because I feel like I want this to be really exact. I'm going to find my center. Oh, and the center is actually a little bit, see? Center is not actually the center on this. I probably used a little bit more seam allowance on one side. And I'm going to align that. Yeah. And then I'm going to start pinning. Sometimes forget how, when I'm holding this thing, where it is in the camera. Now, if I had a little additional fabric, and which I don't, I would definitely like to redo this. And I'm actually thinking about, is there some way for me to do that? But, I'm just not going to do it because I don't have any additional fabric. So, with that said, be pretty careful with your stitching. I think in this case, I had to use a rather large stitch, but I don't think my sewing machine is maybe capable of doing a nice even wide stitch, or at least not to the same quality as the Carmel machines. And I say that because, well, as I was doing the pink, the thread just kept breaking, and I'm using a very strong thread. What they provide you is very strong, a very fine quality cotton thread, and it just kept snapping. So I reached out to Leo and I said, is there some sort of a magic trick to getting this done? And he said, no, you just run two. It was funny. He said, no, you just run 2 lines of stitching down the center. You're going to actually be running these about 1/4 of an inch from the folded edge. But that's what he said. No, there's no secret. You just run it. And I was thinking, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I'm doing something wrong. But, you know, we live and we learn for the next time. So this is all pinned on with the exception of this little bit back here, which I'm going to trim off after I've pinned it down so those gathers don't go anywhere. Yeah, it's very thick and it doesn't want to go through for me. There we go. And I'll show you what it really should look like. Look how gorgeous this is. Look how tight and beautiful. I mean, they almost look like they're fluted. Mine kind of look a little bit like a train wreck. But again, you know, first time I'm actually doing this technique, so it's for me, and that's okay. If it was for you, you'd better believe I would be redoing it. So I'm going to continue working on this. I'm going to, again, take some very small stitches through the center of this into the bodice, into the tarlatan, and then I'm going to finish the other sleeve, and then we're going to do the same thing that we were doing here. And again, I think you know, if you're starting with the bottom, which you probably should, you're going to need only about 19 inches of the ungathered tube of fabric. And once you sort of turn that inside out, obviously you're going to iron it flat. So you probably only need about 19 inches of each color to do this with when it's gathered. For these, I think you probably just want to like maybe experiment a little bit, see, you know, I'm not sure exactly what a width this might be, but I don't know if that was 19, I probably would try maybe like 10. I think maybe for the cuff and for, whoops, this is caught, for the cuff and for the bodice, front bodice embellishment, I probably will just do a long piece. I will, I'll basically sew it in place on the cuff or here, and then I'll use whatever is left over here, because I just think, you know, once you've made it, and you should use it. So I will go away and I'll do that, and then I'm going to come back and show you the finishing touches with this gathered ribbon. I might as well show you the closures now. The closures are going to be 3 hooks and 3 eyes or eye loops, and those are going to be done in such a way where the back almost meets. It's not going to overlap, it's going to meet. So, you know, I think this is interesting actually how this is done. The middle part of the eye has been sewn in, and it's actually been stitched here and here, so it doesn't flip up. So it's a very snug sort of fit. I think that's great. I think probably Leo did this sample. Beautiful, beautiful work as always. So I'm going to go away and I'm going to finish as much as I can on this, and then come back and show you the finishing touches for the bodice.
Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button.